Welcome to Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings. Today's story begins with the chapter on the Demon King Zahhak. We begin with the tale of Mirdas and his son Zahak. In those days, in the lands of the Arabs, there was a good and fine king who sighed with fear before God. His name was Mirdas, and he was a man of great generosity and justice. Each of the herds he had entrusted to his shepherds numbered 1,000, whether of cows or Arab horses or goats or milk-giving sheep, and he freely gave milk to anyone who needed it. The righteous man had a son whose character had very little kindness in it. He was an ambitious youth named Zahak, brave, turbulent in his moods, and of an evil disposition. Everyone called him Bivarasp, a Pavlovi word meaning 10,000 horses, because he had 10,000 Arab horses, all with golden bridles. He spent most of his days and nights riding them, not into battle so much as to demonstrate his wealth and generosity and greatness. Now one day at dawn, Eblis appeared with Zahak, presenting himself as a friendly well-wisher, and the youth was charmed by his conversation. Eblis said, "First, I want you to promise that our talk will be confidential, and then I will tell you what I have to say." The young man greeted him kindly and answered, "I will tell no one anything I hear from you." Eblis said, "Listen to my advice. No one but you should be in charge here. With a son like you, why should an old worn-out father go on ruling so long? Take his place. You're the person best fitted for the position. If you listen to my advice, you will be the ruler of the world." Zahak heard him out and considered his words, but the thought of shedding his father's blood troubled his heart. He said, "This is wrong. Give me different advice. This is not something I can do." Eblis said, "If you don't follow my advice, you're breaking your promise. You'll stay in a wretched subject, and your father will stay the ruler." And so he led the Arab into his trap, and Zahak decided to obey him. He said, "Tell me how to do it, and what's the best way to accomplish this?" "Don't make excuses now," Eblis replied. "I will take care of how it is to be done. Your head will rise in heaven like the sun." King Mirdas owned a fine orchard, and he would go there in the dawn's darkness to wash his head and body and to pray. The servant who accompanied him did not bring a lamp. Eblis dug a deep pit there, and when the Arab king arrived in the orchard the next day, he fell into the pit and broke his back. The reverent man's good fortune was at an end, and his life departed. Then Eblis filled the pit in with soil and went on his way. The noble king had taken pains to bring up his son in comfort. He had rejoiced in him and given him wealth. But his evil offspring broke faith with him and became complicit to his father's murder. I heard a wise man say that no matter how much of a savage lion a man might be, he does not shed his father's blood. And if there is some untold secret here, it is the mother who can answer an inquirer's questions. In this way, the willful, unjust Zahak seized his father's throne, placed the Arab crown on his head, and became the dispenser of largesse and punishments to his people. When Eblis saw how effective his words had been, he gave some new evil advice. He said to Zahak, "If you will do my will, I will give you all you could wish from the world. Follow my orders, and you will be king of the earth. Its animals, its men, its birds and fish will all be yours." Next, Eblis disguised himself as an intelligent, talkative young man and appeared humbly before Zahak. He said, "If the king will accept my service, I am an excellent cook." Zahak welcomed him and set a place for him and gave him the key to the royal kitchens and pantries. At that time, not many foods were known, and there were few dishes made from meat. The new cook made dishes from the flesh of birds and animals, feeding Zahak on blood to build up his valor as if he were a lion, all the while obeying all his orders, and apparently submitting his heart to the king's command. First, he made a dish from egg yolks to make him strong and healthy. Zahak ate the dish and congratulated his cook, who received a reward for his labors. This kind of concerned and cunning Eblis said, "May you live proudly and forever. Tomorrow I shall prepare food which will nourish all your body." Then he left the king's presence and meditated all day on the wonderful dish he would make the following day. In the morning, the sun's topaz appeared in the blue dome of the heaven, and the cook's heart was filled with hope as he brought in a dish made from a partridge and white pheasant meat. When the king of the Arabs sat down to eat, he gave his foolish head into Eblis' hands. On the third day, the cook made dishes of chicken and lamb kebab, and on the fourth, of veal cooked with saffron, rosewater, aged wine, and pure musk. When Zahak stretched out his hand and ate, he was astonished at the man's skill. He said to him, "You are a well-meaning man, considering what it is that you desire, and ask me for it." The cook said, "May you live forever, your majesty. My heart is filled with love for you, and my soul is nourished only by your glances. I have one request to ask of the victorious king, even though I quite unworthy of it, and this is that if he will command me to kiss his shoulders and rub my eyes and face there." When Zahak heard his words, he had no notion of what the man was plotting, and said, "I grant you your request, and may your name be honored for it." Then he said that the cook should kiss his shoulders, as if they were bosom friends. The demon kissed the king's shoulders and disappeared forthwith. No man had ever seen such a wonder in all the world. 2 black snakes grew from Zahak's shoulders. In his distress, the king looked and saw them, and picked up his sword and cut them off. But they grew again on his shoulders like the limbs of a tree. Learned doctors gathered about him, and one of them gave their opinions. They tried every kind of remedy, but were unable to cure the king of his affliction. When Eblis himself appeared in the guise of a wise doctor and said to Zahak, "These growths were fated to appear here. The snakes, where they are, they should not be cut back. You must prepare food for them and placate them by feeding them. This is the only thing that you can do. Give them nothing but human brains to eat, and they should die from such food." And what the evil demon's purpose in offering this is, no one knows. Meanwhile, Persia was filled with dissension and revolt. The bright day darkened, and men broke faith with Jamshid. His divine fire grew dim, and he gave himself to evil and foolishness. Petty kings and their armies sprang up on all sides. Every province produced its own claimant to the throne, and they felt no love for Jamshid. A contingent made their way to the Arab lands, where they heard there lived a terrifying lord with a face like a serpent. Seeking kings, Persia's horsemen approached Zahak. They greeted him as a sovereign, hailing him as the ruler of Iran. This serpentine creature came to Persia as quickly as the wind and blows, and there set the crown on his head. From every province he gathered together an army of Persians and Arabs and attacked Jamshid on his throne, drawing the noose tight around him. When Jamshid saw that his good fortune had deserted him, he fled and went into hiding, grieving in darkness, abandoning his crown and throne, his sovereignty, armies, and wealth to Zahak. For 100 years, no one saw him anywhere in the world. But then, this infidel king appeared on the shores of the Sea of China. He had hidden away from the Serpent King, but could not escape him in the end. When Zahak had him in his clutches, he gave no time to plead his case, but sawed him in two, and filled the world with terror at his fate. Jamshid's throne and glory were at an end. Drawn away by time, and amber draws away straw, and what profits to him were all the troubles he endured while he sat on his throne. He had lived for 700 years, bringing good and evil to light. But what good is a long life, since the world will never reveal her secrets to you? Her wine and honey will allay your fears, and her beguiling voice charm your ears. And when you're sure that she will never show evil to you, she strikes the fatal blow. The reign of Zahak, he reigned for 1,000 years, and from end to end the world was his command. The wise concealed themselves and their deeds, and the devils achieved their heart's desire. Virtue was despised, and magic applauded. Justice hid itself away, while evil flourished. Demons rejoiced in their wickedness, while goodness was spoken of only in secret. 2 innocent young women were dragged from Jamshid's house, trembling like the leaves of a willow tree. They were Jamshid's sisters, the crown among his womenfolk. One of these veiled women was Shahnameh, and her chaste sister was Arnavaz. Zahak trained them in magic, and taught them evil ways, since he himself knew nothing but evil, murder, rapine, and burning of cities. Each night, 2 young men, either peasants or of noble stock, were brought to Zahak's palace. There, in the hope of finding a cure to the king's malady, they were killed, and their brains made into a meal for the snakes. At the same time, there were 2 noble, upright men who lived in his reign. One was Armayel, the pious, and the other Garmiel, the perceptive. Together they talked of the king's injustice and the evil manner in which he was nourished. One said, "We should go and present ourselves as cooks to the king to see if we can save at least one of each pair who are killed to feed the snakes." They learned how to prepare the numerous dishes and were accepted as cooks in the king's kitchen. When the victims were dragged before the cooks, and the time came for their blood to be spilled, the 2 men looked up one another with eyes filled with tears and with rage in their hearts. Unable to do more, they saved one of the 2 from slaughter, substituting the brains of a sheep, which they mixed with the brains of the man they killed. And so they were able to rescue one of each pair, to whom they said, "Hide yourselves away in the plains and mountains far from these towns." And in this way they saved 30 victims a month. And when there were 200 of them, the cooks secretly gave them goats and sheep, and showed them a deserted area where they could live. The Kurds, who never settled in towns, are descended from these men. Meanwhile, Zahak reigned even more cruelly. If a warrior had a beautiful daughter hidden away in his house, Zahak would accuse him of consorting with demons and kill him, and have the girl brought to him to be made a slave. He acted without regard for the customs of kings or the laws of religion. See what God did to Zahak when he still had 40 years to live. Late one night, he was sleeping with Arnavaz, when he dreamed that the warrior suddenly appeared from an imperial palace. The youngest of the 3 was all tall as a cypress tree. The royal fire radiated from him, and he strode forward between the other 2 like a prince, ready for battle, and bearing an ox-headed mace. He attacked Zahak, and smote him on the head with his ox-headed mace. The young man flayed him from head to foot, and tied his hands behind his back, and set a yoke on his shoulders. Then he dragged him to Mount Damaved, with a group of onlookers following. Zahak writhed in his sleep, and felt that his liver was split with terror. He cried out, and his pillared chamber shook with the noise. His beautiful servant girls sprang up to their master's scream, and Arnavaz said to him, "Tell me, my lord, what is troubling you? You are sleeping safely in your own home, It must be something in your soul that has terrified you. The 7 climes are yours to rule. The animals, the men, and demons watch over you safely. The king said to his womenfolk, "You will not be able to conceal what I tell you, and when you hear this wonder, you will despair of my life." Arnavez replied, "You should tell us your secret. We might be able to suggest some remedy, since no calamity is without a remedy." The king described his dream, and Arnavez said, "You should not neglect this, but your throne rules the world, which shines with splendor, and all the animals, men, demons, birds, and fairies pay homage to your seal ring. Summon astrologers and magicians from every province. Tell them what you have seen. Seek out the truth of the matter. See in whose hand your life lies, and whether or not it is a man, a demon, or a fairy that threatens you. When you know this, that will be the time to make plans. Don't tremble in fear at your enemy's malevolence." The king liked the advice of this woman, whose body was as elegant as a cypress tree, and whose face was as lovely as the stars. The world was black like a raven's wing, when suddenly light appeared above the mountains, as if it was the sun scattering topazes in a purple sky. The king summoned eloquent and learned sages from every quarter and told them of his heart-wrenching dream. He said, "Is it good or ill these signs portend? When will my earthly life come to an end? Who will come after me? Say, who will own this royal diadem and belt and throne? Reveal this mystery and do not lie. Tell me the secret or prepare to die." The sages' lips were dry, and their cheeks wet with tears. They said one to the other, "If we tell him what will happen, our soul will be worthless, and if he doesn't hear from us, we must wash our hands of life here and now." 3 days went by, and no one dared speak to Zahak. On the 4th he said, "Either be strung up on a gibbet alive, or tell me my fate." All of the sages bowed their heads, and their hearts were filled with terror, their eyes with tears. One of them, a wise and prudent man named Zahak, stepped forward. Anxiety seized his heart, but he spake out fearlessly before Zahak. "Rid your mind of vain thoughts, since no man is born from his mother but for death. Many worthy kings have sat on the throne before you, and experienced great sorrows and great joys. Each of them died and left the world in another's hand. Surround yourself with iron walls reaching to the sky, but you cannot remain here. Another man will occupy your throne, and your good fortune will lie in the dust. This celestial ruler's name will be Fereydun. He is not born yet, but his mother's time of anxiety and sighs is still to come. But which he is born, he will be like a fruitful tree. When he grows to be a man, he will lift his head up to the moon and seek the crown and throne and royal belt. He will be a cypress tall, and on his shoulders will carry an iron ox-headed mace, which he will bring down on your head. Then he will bind you and drag you from your place into the streets." Zahak asked, "Why should he bind me? What will make him hate me?" The sage replied, "If you are wise, you will know that a man does not do evil for no reason. His father will die at your hands, and this will fill him with a desire for vengeance. A cow named Barmea will be his wet nurse, and this too will be destroyed by you, and be an added cause of his hatred for you." Zahak heard him out, then fell from the throne in a faint, and the sage, fearing for his life, fled from the royal presence. When Zahak regained consciousness, he sat on his throne again and gave orders that the world be scored for signs of Fereydun. He knew no rest, and could neither eat nor sleep. The brightness of his days had darkened. And there we end our tale for today, but there will be more tomorrow.